From VOA Learning English, this is the Technology Report. In Cuba, the Internet and other forms of modern communication are not easily available. Most people have smartphones, but they are limited to making and receiving calls. It is difficult to connect to social media, send emails, and text. Most Cubans do not have an internet connection in their homes. To use the internet, they first must buy a password. Businesses sell them on little pieces of paper. Each password costs about 2.5 Cuban convertible pesos. That is equal to about $2.50. Users then go to a public park or a hotel with an internet connection. In a park about 15 minutes from downtown Havana, hundreds of Cubans come at all times of the day and night to use the internet. Recently, about 50 people were there, each holding a phone, talking with friends and family, or catching up on social networks. Suki John was born in New York. He is a dance teacher and has been coming to Cuba to work for many years. He goes to the park to connect to the internet and says it is now more available. John says using the internet was not possible when he was in Cuba a year and a half ago. Things have improved because American President Barack Obama and Cuban President Raul Castro are talking, John says. Having the internet in parks has let Cubans learn what is happening in the rest of the world, he says. It costs about $3 an hour to connect to the internet. That is too costly for many Cubans who earn about $30 a month. For VOA Learning English, I'm Carolyn Presutti.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Technology Report. The social media company Twitter has shut down more than 125,000 accounts in the past 8 months. Most of the accounts reportedly were connected to extremist groups that aid terrorism. Twitter posted a blog in which the company said it condemns the use of Twitter to support terrorism. It also said that Twitter rules clearly state that any violent threat is not permitted on the service. Twitter has said it only closes accounts when they are reported by other users. But it said it had increased the size of teams that receive and act on the reports. Twitter said its reaction time to reports is much faster now than it once was. The company said it has already seen results because of these actions. Many social media companies are taking stronger steps against extremist groups that use their websites. Facebook is leading the way. Legislators have proposed forcing companies to report terrorist activity on their sites to law enforcement. Social media companies are concerned about governmental interference in the industry. Twitter said that it has cooperated with law enforcement at the right times. It said that it seeks balance in enforcing its rules and supporting law enforcement with the desire of users to share their views. Seamus Hughes is Deputy Director of George Washington University's Program on Extremism. He said that many extremists have moved to smaller, less watched social media services in recent months. For VOA Learning English, I'm Jonathan Evans.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Economics Report. In 2009, the U.S. automobile industry was close to collapse. It was during the biggest economic downturn in more than 80 years. People stopped buying new vehicles. At the time, financial help from the government saved several auto manufacturers from closing. Now, 7 years later, a reformed auto industry is open for the public to see. American auto companies are putting their vehicles on display at the 2016 North American International Auto Show in Detroit, Michigan. But there is more to see than just new cars and trucks. The biggest news at this year's auto show is not about the outside of the autos. Michael Caudill, a U.S. automotive expert, says it is what manufacturers are planning to put inside them. He says every automaker at the show is launching some form of cool technology inside the vehicles. Caudill's examples include a special type of cruise control, smart stop technology, and even 3D, that's three-dimensional, printing to print out and create the interior of your vehicle. Much of what customers will find in an auto dealer's showroom this year is at the Detroit Auto Show. This includes vehicles that are large but use little fuel. Caudill says the fuel side of the business is a big part of what automakers are doing. He says customers want to know how many miles they can get on one tank of gasoline. A tank of gasoline is much cheaper today. That is because of the worldwide drop in oil prices. In many parts of the U.S., gasoline is less than $2 a gallon. Even so, Caudill says, electric-powered vehicles and motors that use less fuel are still important on the show floor. For VOA Learning English, I'm Ann Ball.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Science Report. 3 university students in Santiago, Chile, have come up with a green way to produce power. They developed a device that uses soil to charge mobile phone batteries. The device can also power other small electronics. The engineering students got the idea while relaxing outside, taking a break from their exams. The batteries on their mobile phones were empty. One of the student inventors, Evelyn Aravina, noted that plants are living things and able to produce energy. Their invention is a small circuit board they call Ikaya. The Ikaya solved two problems for the engineering students. They needed to come up with a class project. They also needed an outlet to plug in their phones. The Ikaya captures the energy plants produce during a process called photosynthesis. That occurs when a green plant turns water and gas into food or energy as the plant is exposed to light. A plant uses only a small part of that energy to grow. The rest stays in the soil. One of the student inventors says the device changes the energy released from the plant into low-level power to charge phones. The Ikaya device collects the extra energy from the plant without harming it. It plugs into the soil and then into a mobile phone. The Ikaya is able to fully recharge a mobile phone battery in less than 2 hours. The inventors hope that the technology can one day be used for much bigger projects, like public parks. They imagine the power for the park's street lamps coming from its own trees and plants. For VOA Learning English, I'm Carolyn Persutti.
Valentine's Day is when we celebrate everything about falling and being in love. But finding and keeping our true love, that can be tricky. Hollywood knows.
I'm in love with you.
Snap out of it!
All my life, I've been waiting for someone, and when I find her, she's a fish.
Where I'm going, you can't follow. What I've got to do, you can't be any part of.
There is Hollywood, and there is real life. Joyce Morris and Norwood Thomas know that. Thomas, a World War II veteran, met Morris, his first love, in war-torn London. It was 1944. He was 21 years old. She was 18. They fell in love, but the war separated them. They went on to marry other people, Thomas in the United States, Morris in Australia. He kept her photograph. She never forgot him. Morris's marriage ended. Thomas's wife died.
A World War II veteran?
In 2010, Thomas did something that caught the media's attention. He went skydiving on his 88th birthday.
My last jump was in Normandy on June 6, 1944. It was a combat jump in France.
The attention resulted in Thomas and Morris reconnecting on Skype last year. That led to donations that permitted Thomas to fly to Australia for Valentine's Day.
What's the first thing you're going to do?
I'm going to give her a squeeze.
They hugged each other for the first time in more than 70 years.
So very long.
Their story proves it's never too late for love and a Hollywood ending.
Anything can happen, don't you think?
Yes, darling, yes, yes, yes.
Are you ready for the event?
We are ready for the event.
Voice of America, this is Mission Control Houston. Please call station for a voice check.
We hear you loud and clear. Welcome aboard the space station.
Scott and Mikhail, you are space pioneers. This is the first time that anybody's been up in space longer than 6 months, and you've been there 11 months now. We had someone from our worldwide audience at VOA write in and wanted to know from Ethiopia, what is your mission? Can you tell us? What is your mission? What are you doing up there?
Well, this actually isn't the first time people have been in space for longer than 6 months. We've had crew members on the International Space Station longer than that, I think a little bit over 200 days. And the Russians have flown cosmonauts on the Mir space station, I think Salyut before that, for a year, and in some cases longer. But this is the first time we're flying this long on the International Space Station. We've been here for over 10 months, and we'll leave in March. We launched in March. And our mission here is to understand the effects, mostly the effects on our physiology and psychology of long-duration space flight, so we can eventually go on to Mars. And the space station is a really unique facility to do this kind of research, and we have it now, so we should use it for that.
What are some of the highlights of your research? What have you found so far?
So there are about 400 different scientific experiments going on here throughout the course of the year that Misha and I are here. And they're in all different scientific disciplines. Some of them, however, are dedicated to our time on board, and those are mostly related to our physiology. There are issues with long-duration spaceflight, and the longer you stay here, the problem or the problems that can occur with our physiology increase, such as bone loss and muscle loss, effects on our vision, even our cardiovascular health, effects on from the radiation environment, things like that. And we've done a lot of recording of the data. Last week we had an experiment in the Russian segment that used a lot of the imaging technology we have here on the U.S. segment, but using their device that puts negative pressure on our body to look at our, the vessels in our head and our heart and our eyes to see if there's an effect on our vision. And all this data that we've been collecting over there, it needs to go down to Earth and analyzed. And it's really not until the scientists have collected it all will they sit down and take a very close look and see exactly what we've learned and then report on it.
And how is your vision? Have you had any problems with your vision?
I was up here last time for 159 days, and I did have some effects on the physiology of my eyes that were measured actually when I returned. But my experience hasn't been much different than last time. I do notice some effects initially, but those have stabilized. But to add to your last question, what have we learned since we've been up here? One thing I have learned is that a year is a really long time.
Yes, well, I was going to ask both of you, what is the psychology of being confined in this space station for a year? Are you guys going stir crazy?
Well, I'll let Misha speak for himself, but I don't feel like I'm going stir crazy. I'm not really actually sure what that means. To be honest with you, I don't feel like I have this sense of I got to get out of here as soon as possible kind of feeling. I do miss a lot of things on Earth. I definitely look forward to going home, but I do appreciate this opportunity, and I think what we're doing here is important, and it does seem like a privilege. So on one hand it's hard being up here for this long, and but when we recognize the importance of it, it makes it easier. And I'll let Misha answer for himself.
I
fully agree with my colleague and my friend Scott. I can only add that we were selected based on how reliable and how tough we are. So if necessary, we can break this record even further. I wouldn't say this is easy, but I think we could stay here for a little longer and make one more step.
Yes, and I wanted to ask Mikhail this question, that in an interview before you left Earth, you said, if we could send the two presidents up for 2 weeks, problems on Earth would be settled. So what do you think about that now, 10 months later? Is it time to use the space station for such high-level talks? Is this the way to get peace in the world?
Ну, сейчас я могу только подтвердить мои слова до старта.
I can only confirm the words that I said prior to launch.
Потому что я все больше убеждаюсь.
Because I become more and more confirmed in the fact that, given how long we've been here on station and during the entire flight, which is a proof, that how we can effectively work together, we, meaning people from different countries, of different confessions, together in space for the benefit of humanity. So I can only confirm my words. If we could send our politicians here for a month or a month and a half, then all the problems on Earth would be resolved much easily.
Scott, let me ask you this. You've taken these beautiful pictures. When you look down at Earth and when you look out to space, what do you see? What do you think about? How does it change your view of humanity and life on Earth?
Just to put this in perspective, I follow the news very closely up here, and we have the news going on in the adjacent module pretty much all the time, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and you're always kind of hearing it. And you do get a sense that you know what's going on Earth, and you pay attention to it. And you look down at the Earth, there's a window right down here, and you do feel detached from it. And it does, between those two of those things, just kind of following what's going on very closely and feeling some detached from the planet, you do get a sense that there's a lot of bad stuff going on down there all the time. Like the news is mostly bad, and it's it's really unfortunate and really sad that that's the case. I'm certainly not blaming the people that report the news. I'm just saying, as an observation, there's it's mostly bad stuff that we hear about, and it's really a shame, because when we do look down at the Earth, it is such a beautiful place. It's it's our home, and it's a home that we need to take care of. We're all in this kind of like on the space station here. We're all in this together. We need to rely on ourselves for our our survival. I kind of feel the same way about the people on Earth, that when we look down there and get a little bit of a sense of that. And
thank you for joining us. We're out of time.
Because it does look very fragile from space. So
thank you,
do get
Scott.
a little bit of a different perspective, I think, spending this much time away from the planet.
Thank you for joining us, Scott and Mikhail. We're out of time. Thank you for being with VOA.
Station, this is Houston ACR. That concludes the Voice of America portion of the event.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Science Report. Why is it that when dogs drink, water seems to go everywhere? But when cats drink, the water is usually contained. Researchers at Virginia Tech University in Blacksburg, Virginia, have been studying why this happens. They say the mouths of cats and dogs are structured almost the same way. They found that cats and dogs do not have a full set of cheeks. This means they cannot create the force needed to drink, like humans, or elephants, or horses. But here is a surprise. The studies show that each family of animals has its own special drinking method. Sunny Jeong is the study's author and an associate professor of biomedical engineering and mechanics at Virginia Tech University. He says before they did basic studies of how cats and dogs drink, their guess was that it was about the same way. Instead, they found that cats and dogs are quite different when it comes to drinking water. Dogs must quickly move their tongues down into the water to build speed. They curl their tongues backwards and bring the water up and into their mouths. Cats do not bend their tongues. They use less speed and a more gentle action. They just skim or barely touch the surface of the water to drink it. Sean Gart is a researcher and Virginia Tech graduate student. He says cats are viewed as neat and dogs as messy while drinking. But that is because dogs have to move their tongues fast in the water. This makes good use of the way the water motion works. The research findings were published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. For VOA Learning English, I'm Ann Ball.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Science Report. The amount of fish being caught worldwide is much larger than has been reported. And that could mean serious problems for the environment and nations that depend on fisheries. A new estimate places the world fish catch at 109 million metric tons. That is 32 million tons higher than the yearly totals governments have been reporting. The same report notes that the world's fish catch has been shrinking since the late 1990s. Countries report their industrial catches to the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization. But they do not report other kinds of fishing. This includes that fishing done for recreation and individual food, and the catches of small commercial fisheries, known as artisanal fisheries. Daniel Pauly of the University of British Columbia led the study. He noted that a large percentage of the world's fish catch is thrown away. He told VOA that better estimates of the actual global catch will help ensure there will be enough fish in the future. He added that fish catches have been decreasing since 1996. The researchers also found ways that the world's fisheries are changing. It found that fishing fleets of larger nations are catching fish in the waters of developing countries more and more. Daniel Pauly said he was surprised by the amount of fishing done by foreigners in competition with local fishers. He said many European and Asian fishing boats are operating in waters off the coast of West Africa, for example. The online journal Nature Communications published the findings. For VOA Learning English, I'm Jonathan Evans.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Economics Report. Zimbabwe recently announced that it would change to the Chinese yuan as its reserve currency. A reserve currency is a large amount of foreign money held by governments and financial organizations. It is used to pay their international debts. Patrick Chinamasa is Zimbabwe's Minister of Finance and Economic Development. He says China agreed to cancel about $40 million of Zimbabwe's debts for 2015. He also says the move was a sign of the friendship between China and Zimbabwe, a poor country in southern Africa. It is also a sign of the growing economic ties between China and Zimbabwe. China is Zimbabwe's largest foreign investor, with interests including technology, energy, and construction. Local economists say Zimbabwe has been flooded with foreign currencies since the Zimbabwean dollar broke apart in 2009. In 2014, the nation's central bank permitted traders to use the US dollar, the Japanese yen, the Chinese yuan, and 6 other types of foreign monies. Business advisor Philip Ciccone says most traders prefer the US dollar, the country's major currency. Zimbabwe's cost of living is about 60% higher than that of neighboring South Africa. China's president visited Zimbabwe recently and signed many economic agreements. This included a $1 billion loan for a power plant. Bank ABC chief economist James Wade says this action could result in more Chinese investment and more development. If so, Zimbabweans will profit, no matter what currency they use. For VOA Learning English, I'm Carolyn Presutti.